Hello, I'm Mark, I'm the host of the Channel Chat podcast show, and today I have Fiona McKenzie, the CEO of Revere, in the studio. How are we doing, Fiona?
Very good, Mark. Thank you for having me. Good to be back.
Yeah, thanks for coming in. Now, Fiona, there is a specific reason I wanted to get you in, because normally on the show I'll talk about people's careers and stuff like that, and it's very, very interesting. But the reason I wanted to get you into the studio was because you put out quite an audacious and provoking post last week, and I thought, you know what, the listeners might want to hear about this story, because a lot of this actually comes up in the channel, but normally people can't talk about it, don't mention it. So funny enough, I'll give you a bit of a story, because I was actually at lunch with someone today, and I told them that what I was going to actually do today with this potential talk, and they go, "Oh, I can't wait to watch that, Mark. It'd be nice to hear you squirm." Because I was thinking, what's going to happen? No one's actually coming up to me with sexual harassment accusations and all this sort of stuff. And I was thinking, God, this is actually going to be quite a hot topic in the market, and also as well quite uncomfortable for me to ask, because some of these questions I'm thinking people don't realise this is going on, or if they do, they're certainly not out there going to be talking about it. So
that's right.
If there's any questions you feel uncomfortable with, fine, don't answer, but I feel it's appropriate for me to ask you them. So one of the questions I wanted to talk about was, there is a new duty to prevent sexual harassment in the workplace legislation. It came out, I think, end of October.
That's right.
What steps do you believe the channel should be doing to even comply with that and make it a safer working environment?
So I think firstly it's about making sure that leaders within the channel have acknowledged that this legislation's come into place. So I think where there is a lot of small to medium sized businesses, it can be easy for that to be overlooked. I'm really lucky within my business, I have a great HR director who brings this information to me, who keeps on top of it and who champions it. So in our organisation, before this incident, which I'm sure we'll come on to talk about, occurred, I'd already implemented steps within our business to run a risk assessment, to look at our policies, to update our policies, and we ran mandatory training for sexual harassment across the whole of our organisation, and then additional training for our line management. So I think overall the steps that people need to be taking, and it comes down to one word, is proactivity. This is about taking steps for prevention, not being reactive when things happen.
Now, you've been pretty active in promoting equality and diversity across the channel. You're a big advocate of that. You go into events, you're talking about it all the time. But can you share with me what motivated you to speak up about this incident, and why did you do it?
Yeah, so I think for a bit of context, I think, I attended a well-known industry event, and I had a pretty serious act of physical sexual harassment. And I feel I'm in a position where I did think, should I speak up about it? And I did pretty quickly within 24 hours. I notified the event organisers. I've had incredible support from them, both personally, and they've also taken some steps to address what happened and think about steps for future prevention. But I really, if you're going to go out, for me as an individual, if I'm going to speak on panels about diversity, about inclusion in the workplace, if I'm going to be, the leader I want to be in my business and champion that within Revere, then I felt morally and to kind of remain authentic, which I very much tried to be online, I needed to post about this and raise awareness of what had happened to me. But I think the reason I'm here today, and the reason I really felt the right thing to do was to come and talk about this, it isn't about that incident and what happened to me necessarily. It is about the stories that women across the channel have shared with me since I posted that. So when I made that post, I think it was on a Friday, over the weekend I was inundated with messages from a variety of women across the channel. Some I know well, some I don't know so well but have respected and admired, and some people I've never met. And they shared stories, and some of those stories varied in terms of different forms of harassment. And I think it was quite eye-opening. There has been a lot of people who have these stories to tell, but they don't feel they can come forward and share them. And I felt, rightly or wrongly, I had a duty to use, not everyone's in a position to have this platform, and I appreciate you kind of giving me the opportunity to talk about it. I guess to speak on behalf of those women that have shared their stories with me, because it's more about that collective voice.
You've been inundated with messages, I'm sure, for support of what's happened. Can you share some of the sort of common themes the messages have come from the women that have messaged you? What's been the common theme throughout?
Yeah, I think obviously, there's a duty to be sensitive to any sort of individual stories, but to your point around common themes, quite often men within their organisation, which makes it hard for them to speak up, or people of a more senior position as well, or in fact well-known people within the industry. So that is probably the short summary of why people are remaining silent. But I think the thing that has stuck with me is people were very quick to respond and share their stories, and it's clearly been quite traumatising and stayed with people. So what might perhaps seem like an insignificant act has actually been quite, has been detrimental to how people have viewed attending these types of events. And people have said, I no longer attend them because of what happened in the past. And that's sad, and that's something that we need to try and avoid moving forward. We have to be able to create a safe environment for our teams to be able to attend industry events. It's got to be something that we all work towards together.
Has your perspective sort of changed over the years, and what do you think your sort of personal experience of that has played a part in that?
Yeah, I've worked in the channel for a long time, sort of over 15 years, and I worked on a lot of big channel partner events for vendors at a point in my career. And sexual harassment of any form has never been acceptable. I did experience it a lot in my 20s when I was working in that environment, and I didn't speak up. I just wrongly accepted it, and probably for the same reasons other people aren't speaking up today. I think now, I'm a mother to 2 children kind of entering their teenage years, and a lot of the men who have contacted me, that I know, they've also cited the fact that they have daughters and they're thinking about the environment that they're going into. So I think probably since stepping into a leadership position and since becoming a mother, you start to think, okay, I have a responsibility to try and be part of the solution. And look, I'm not, as you know, Mark, I would rather sit all day long and discuss the alignment of marketing and sales. Like, that's what I want to be known for. That's my specialism. That's the mission that I'm on to try and do. That's my day-to-day role. But alongside this, I feel like where people are in a position and they have a platform, they have to use it to try and support this and open up people's eyes. Some of the conversations I've had with some really well-respected men in the channel that are in leadership positions, they've just not had their eyes open to it. And I think anything that we can do to start the conversation, particularly amid the recent legislation that's gone into play, is a good thing.
You mentioned you've been in the industry 15 years. Now, I'm not going to try and normalise it, but 15 years ago, these incidents would have been happening, but it would almost be like normalised and been accepted. But the world is very different now, isn't it? People won't accept these sort of, incidents that goes on. Now, as I said, I'm not going to normalise it, but one of these things, we're not vilifying for things that happen, but how do we stop and make people aware that, yes, these things aren't acceptable, but it's certainly not acceptable in the modern workforce for inclusion and diversity in 2025 in the UK channel?
Yeah, I mean, any form of sexual harassment of any type at any point has never been okay. I think that cultural change and, there is a lot of positive people coming into the workforce that are advocating better working practices across all areas of inclusion and marginalisation. So I think we're on the right trajectory, to your point. You know, if I look at my daughter's school, you know, this month we got an email out to parents to say they have a educational theatre workshop group going in to, probably because of the timing of the legislation, to raise awareness of different types of sexual harassment and to know what to do and the steps to take to ensure prevention, but also then support should instances occur. So I think, you know, my objective here today is to not look backwards.
Yeah.
This is about how we move forward together, and, you know, for any leaders kind of, you know, joining or listening to this conversation, is don't assume that everything's okay within your organisation. How do you start conversations? And we have to be able to create safe spaces for people to be able to speak up. Now, I'm no expert in this. This is not my field of expertise, but that's where we have to, as leaders, draw on other people who are experts in this area to help us create a safe working environment. And as I said before, this is about proactivity in my mind.
Because this is going on all the time, yet no one's saying anything. And I will tell you a story that you probably would be shocked I'm going to tell you, but there was a top 100 VAR very recently that had an account director that was having a relationship with their sales support person that recently got charged for rape and convicted on the back of that. So they were basically taking their sales support away to what events or going seeing customers, and there was a rape incident and they got convicted. Now, that hasn't really come out certainly not in the press, and I'm putting it out on the platform now. But those sort of incidences and criminal convictions are happening. Why are people trying to hush it up, and why are trying to people not have a platform? Now, you've been brave enough to sort of speak out, and I admire that. But most people will be like, no, I'm not going to say anything. Why is that?
Do you know what? I honestly, I don't know. What I do know is I had to think long and hard about whether or not I should have this conversation. And maybe it's the similar reason, you know, we've all got kind of, I guess, a reputation, and people view us differently and have different opinions on things. Like I said, my goal, my vision, you know, for my business is to be working with leaders in the technology space to support their marketing and their growth strategies. So you think long and hard, like, is opening up this conversation going to cause a different perception? But ultimately, you have to follow your moral compass.
Yeah.
I think, you know, without commenting on, you know, that individual incident, which I know nothing about, I think, you know, the more you have a diverse leadership team, you know, and I don't just mean women, I mean the more you have kind of diversity within your organisation, I think you're going to be more likely to open up conversations to ensure a safe working environment, not just around sexual harassment, but around all forms of inclusivity, and really minimise marginalisation. You know, I think we have to work hard as leaders to create that culture. It doesn't just come. So again, I guess it comes back down to proactivity, and it isn't an easy conversation. It's not a nice conversation to have. You know, this has played on my mind, not necessarily because of what happened to me. I can move forward from that. I have a great support network. You know, I have a happy marriage and a very supportive husband. I can move on. I can move forward quite quickly with this. But, you know, not everyone has that. And it's not an easy conversation to have. And, you know, like you said to me, you know, is this going to be, before we started, you know, is this going to be a bit of a tough conversation? Because actually I'm a male, I'm the profile of some of these people. Do I have to take a look at what happens in my organisation? Have I you know, all of these kind of things. So I guess it's the type of conversation, like with anything in this area, that makes us all take a step back and just look in the mirror and think, are we doing what we can?
Do you know what, Fiona? Before the conversation, I was thinking, should I make a joke like, no one's sexually harassing me? And I was thinking, no, I can't do this. This is such a serious topic. Because normally I would think males would almost want to dismiss it, because they almost, it's so uncomfortable, they don't want to talk it, or don't want to see it could be prevalent in their own organisation. Because when you mentioned about that workforce and workplace legislation, I'd never heard of it, and I'm running a company, and I reckon there's lots of leaders out there that don't know that legislation. how can we sort of make it, like I said, we don't want to make it the number one topic, but how can we make it that people are aware, and there's a zero tolerance to this sort of stuff moving forward, because I believe this goes on a lot, and I believe it's brushed under the carpet a lot throughout the channel.
I mean, again, I think it really does come down to, I guess, proactivity. So proactivity, firstly, of have you got the right foundations in your business? So there is advice out there with the legislation that's come in. You know, there is advice for, you know, small to medium-sized businesses of what they can do. I think the larger organisations within the channel, you know, they've got the right HR teams, they've got solid people strategies. So I would hope and imagine that they are, you know, underway with their reviews. But then, secondly, that proactivity comes at these points where these things could be an issue. Now, this is, you know, a timely conversation when we're around the Christmas party season. You know, we've just come out of kind of a lot of awards and events season. And, you know, these are situations where the risk is higher. That's fact. I think that's okay to say that. So again, it's about how do we set zero tolerance ahead of these events, remind people and keep it a live conversation. I think that's ultimately what we need to try and do as leaders, is not shy away from it and make sure that zero tolerance in organisations is clear. And you have to act on it. You know, people have to feel like they can speak up.
Yeah. What advice would you give to channel partners that are listening to this, and event organisers that are listening to this, to prevent sexual harassment and support those who do come forward with their experiences? What can they do?
I mean, I think it goes back to what we've just said. I think you need to have those policies in place. You need to have, you know, you have to take a look inside your own organisation, and you might need to face some hard truths about what maybe has happened, acknowledge and accept that, and think about strategies for moving forward. If you look at all of that process side of things, alongside that is a human conversation. And you have to enter this with, you know, a human to human conversation. You have to be able to accept and open up and I guess let your guard down a little bit as to what you might hear, and be prepared to learn. I feel like I have learned an extreme amount about myself, about the industry, about what women have been through. It's been incredibly eye-opening, and I really do hope, you know, as I said, when this happened to me, I have to give credit to the organisers of the event. Lots of people across that organisation reached out to me with support. They have very quickly taken steps to address it, and that's what needs to happen. You know, we need to feel like we can safely speak up, because the more people that speak up, then the voice is louder. But if we're not creating an environment where voices can be heard, then we're not going to see change.
My last question, Fiona, if there's someone out there that has experienced this, maybe in their own organisation, maybe with their boss or their boss's boss or whoever it is, and they don't feel they've got a channel to be able to tell someone, what advice would you give to those people?
I mean, I would really hope that within people's organisations they have a HR team or, you know, an elected, you know, HR professionals that can support them and they feel they can have that trusted conversation with. Organisations need to know what's happening to their workforce if that's happened. Otherwise, there are a number of charities out there that can support people with their experiences. So I guess my encouragement is to speak up, don't stay in silence, and use your support network. I think a lot of people that I've spoken to, you know, they have dealt with it, but it's within their own support network, and that's, you know, that's positive that people feel they've got that support in one way, but it doesn't mean the conversation's been opened up within their organisation, and that's where we need to see change happen.
Fiona, you've been a great guest. Thanks for sharing your story.
Thank you very much for supporting the conversation, and great to be back on Channel Chat once again. Thanks, Mark.